In 1942, the Red Army authorized the mass deployment of women in direct combat roles. This was not an act of desperation. It was a cold tactical calculation to create a precision tool for targeted liquidations. These units functioned as a silent, lethal instrument that would eventually reach the heart of the Reich. Soviet High Command integrated female snipers as a systemic element of the military machine. They were not mere propaganda symbols or auxiliary staff. They were professional combatants integrated into the standard doctrine. This shift represented an unprecedented demographic pivot in the history of European regular armies. Why did the state choose this path? It sought a specific psychological and ballistic advantage on the Eastern European front. The training was rigorous and standardized. Candidates targeted enemy officers and key strategic nodes with surgical intent. Their effectiveness forced the Wehrmacht to implement increasingly violent retaliatory measures. By the final stages of the conflict, these specialists were no longer defending Soviet soil. They were spearheading the relentless advance into enemy territory. By March 1942, the Soviet war machine required more than raw numbers. It demanded precision. Marshal Klement Voroshilov signed a decree that formalized a radical shift in Red Army doctrine. This was not a gesture of desperation. It was a calculated institutionalization of lethal skill. The People's Commissariat of Defense established a rigid bureaucratic sieve. How did the Soviet command compensate for the shortage of surgically precise personnel? They institutionalized specialized female units through a standardized selection protocol. The process lasted 4 days. Commission members sat behind wooden tables in drafty commissariats. They scrutinized primary education certificates. They weighed candidates and measured height. The dry thud of ink stamps finalized the transition from civilian to military asset. Strict criteria governed the intake. Candidates had to be between 20 and 45 years old. This age bracket targeted a demographic already integrated into the pre-war industrial economy. The state required maturity and physical endurance. Paperwork rustled in the silence of recruitment offices. Each file represented a calculated gamble by the high command. The tactical objective remained absolute. These units existed to decapitate enemy leadership through the surgical elimination of strategic targets. The Soviet High Command did not rely on improvisation. Marshal Klement Voroshilov laid the doctrinal foundation for this shift as early as the 1930s. His theory transformed the sniper from a simple marksman into a primary tool of psychological warfare. The strategy focused on systemic paralysis. A single bullet directed at an officer, an artillery observer, or a technical specialist could freeze an entire enemy unit. The objective was not the body count, it was the disproportionate collapse of command and control. Military science then turned toward physiology. Soviet general staff evaluations shifted the focus from raw infantry power to psychological endurance and the capacity for total isolation. Medical and psychological observations suggested a clear gender-based advantage. Data indicated that women possessed greater emotional stability under sustained combat pressure. They demonstrated superior concentration during the mandatory periods of prolonged silence. Their physical profiles proved more resilient during days of absolute immobility. High-ranking commanders on the front lines validated these academic findings through field reports. These documents confirmed higher success rates in female units compared to their male counterparts in specific sectors. In May 1942, the People's Commissariat of Defense institutionalized this lethal expertise. The Central Women's Sniper Training School opened in Veshniaki, a suburb east of Moscow. It functioned as an industrial conveyor for elite combatants. Academic rigor replaced propaganda. Nora Yegorova directed the program. She was a veteran of the Spanish Civil War. Her experience in the international brigades brought European urban warfare tactics to the Soviet curriculum. Yegorova enforced iron discipline. She demanded technical excellence. The curriculum was relentless. Cadets studied internal and external ballistics. They mastered distance calculation and wind compensation. Training sessions lasted between 3 and 6 months. The pace depended on individual performance. The day began before dawn. Cadets started with a 20-kilometer forced march. They moved through the Cosino training grounds near the school. The air smelled of damp earth and pine needles among artificial ruins. After the march, they practiced controlled fire at ranges of 400 and 800 meters. They studied topography and compass orientation. They built shelters and practiced self-sufficient survival. How did the school maintain such high standards? Through systematic filtration. Instructors monitored every movement. Any sign of physical or mental weakness led to immediate removal. The system reallocated those who failed to meet the sniper criteria. They became radio operators or field nurses. The main practice field in Cosino recreated the reality of the front. Engineers constructed full trenches and artificial ruins. They adapted forests for guerrilla warfare. Cadets performed infiltration and escape maneuvers. They conducted tactical terrain surveillance under simulated combat stress. The final test required complete isolation. Cadets survived in the forest for 168 hours. Every graduate from the WWII school received a standardized gear set and an official record book. The Mosin Nagant Model 1891-30 served as the primary instrument. It was the most reliable precision weapon in the Soviet arsenal. A technician fixed the PU optical sight to the receiver. A metallic click signaled the lock. This 3.5 power scope stayed mounted permanently to ensure consistent zeroing. The rifle reached targets at 800 meters. How did the system prevent propaganda padding? Every shot required a signature from an independent observer. Each sniper also carried a Tokarev TT-33 pistol for close-quarters defense. The inventory included camouflage suits, waterproof tarps, and combat knives. Field gear featured a compass and a folding tripod. Bureaucracy dictated the kill count. A sniper entered every confirmed elimination into a personal logbook. An immediate superior then verified the entry. These records moved up to the front staff for final processing. Independent observers watched the scope. This protocol eliminated statistical inflation. The presence of female sniper pairs redefined the tactical landscape of the Eastern Front. German infantry protocols shifted. Movement became restricted. Every open clearing turned into a potential kill zone. The psychological pressure forced the Wehrmacht to increase security measures exponentially. Commanders distributed these graduates with clinical precision. They did not operate in mass formations. Instead, 2 or 3 pairs reinforced an entire division. They favored specific terrain: dense forests, ruined villages, high-altitude vantage points, and enemy blind spots. The geography of their deployment spanned thousands of miles. On the Kalinin front, snipers specialized in a specific task. They eliminated German observers. This blinded enemy artillery. On the First Baltic and Belarusian fronts, the focus shifted to logistics. Cold precision struck supply lines during major offensives. Across the various Ukrainian fronts, the integration reached its peak. Snipers acted as specialized support for light infantry divisions. They moved ahead of the main force. They cleared the path. The military bureaucracy absorbed them into the standard ecosystem of the front line. 12,000 documented kills. This single figure represents the total elimination of a full-strength German infantry division. By June 1943, the success of female sniper pairs forced a shift in Soviet structural doctrine. The High Command stopped seeing them as attachment units. They became a primary force. The military bureaucracy responded by creating the 100th Separate Women's Sniper Battalion. This was the point of total institutionalization. It was no longer a localized experiment or a propaganda gesture. It was a specialized machine for industrial-scale attrition. How effective was this autonomous unit? In practice, the battalion operated with near-total tactical independence. Commanders allowed these squads to select their own targets and define their own methods of approach. They were not subordinates to infantry logic. They were a sovereign entity within the Red Army's ecosystem. This transition marked a silent revolution in Soviet military science. Decisions were driven by ballistics and body counts, not social theory. The female sniper had evolved into Stalin's silent weapon. They functioned as a lethal shadow across the landscape of the Eastern Front. Among the personnel responsible for these 12,000 liquidations was a former kindergarten teacher from the village of Yedma named Rozа Шанина. The bureaucratic machinery of the Red Army recorded the transformation of Rozа Georgievna Шанина with clinical precision. Long before she became the invisible horror of East Prussia, she walked the creaking wooden floors of a kindergarten in Arkhangelsk. The scent of pine and the sound of children defined her world. Born on April 3, 1924, in the rural depths of Yedma, her trajectory seemed fixed in pedagogy. The Vologda Oblast produced loggers and teachers, not elite hunters. The war acted as a violent catalyst. In December 1941, the siege of Leningrad claimed her brother, Mikhail. Grief quickly transitioned into a functional demand for retribution. Szanina walked into the local recruitment office and presented her documents. The officer refused. She was 17. Military regulations prohibited women under 20 from direct combat roles. The system rejected her, but the state provided an alternative path. How did a civilian bypass the blockade of military bureaucracy? The answer lay in Vsevolbuch. This mandatory universal military training program processed over 4 million civilians, creating a massive paramilitary reserve. Throughout 1942, Szanina mastered fundamental ballistics and fieldcraft while still a civilian. This institutionalized persistence eventually forced the hand of the People's Commissariat of Defense. In 1943, the state officially integrated her into the Central Women's Sniper Training School. After 4 months of specialized training, Sergeant Szanina officially declined a secure posting as a rearguard instructor. The bureaucracy of the People's Commissariat of Defense demanded precision. Her curriculum focused on the mechanics of the standard issue Mosin Nagant. She mastered ballistics, calculated windage, and studied the physics of the 7.62 mm round. The process transformed the former civilian into a technical asset. She spent weeks practicing camouflage and infiltration. The objective was total invisibility. In April 1944, Szanina graduated with honors. Ink dried on her transfer orders while her peers remained in Moscow to teach. She chose the front. On April 2, 1944, the military record confirmed her deployment. The Red Army assigned her to the 184th Rifle Division. She joined the 3rd Belarusian Front as a specialist. By June, her unit moved toward the Vitebsk-Orsha offensive. Documented lethality required bureaucratic verification. On April 5, 1944, Major Degtyarev signed the first official report confirming a kill near Vitebsk. This signature transformed a former kindergarten teacher into a verified combat asset. The Red Army pressed the retreating Wehrmacht during the Vitebsk-Orsha offensive. Between April and July, Szanina operated in 12 documented missions. The Order of Glory, 3rd class, arrived on April 18, 1944. This decoration carried deep institutional weight. It mirrored the Imperial St. George's Cross in its focus on individual bravery. Few soldiers under 20 years old received it. Combat in Vilnius changed the scale of her ledger. In July, the Lithuanian capital turned into a dense urban labyrinth. Street fighting required precise, documented results. The military newspaper Krasnaya Zvezda began publishing her name. The press converted the staff reports into a public symbol of female lethality. By the end of the Vilnius operation, her confirmed tally reached 25. After the urban warfare in Vilnius, the 184th Division staff reports began to document a specific tactical evolution. It was the doublet. How did the mechanics of this technique work? The sniper fired twice within a single respiratory cycle, shooting between heartbeats. The process demanded absolute biomechanical control. The sniper took a sharp breath, held it. The body froze. She synchronized the first shot with the natural pause of her lungs. Then, the struggle began. The Mosin Nagant is a bolt-action rifle. Every shot requires manual reloading. The heavy steel bolt must be lifted, pulled back, pushed forward, and locked. This usually breaks the shooter's position and rhythm. Shannina executed this reset while maintaining her aim, firing the second round before her next exhale. The physical strain was immense, yet the results were surgical. Under Kaunas, she spotted a German commander and his observer. 2 high-priority targets. 1 breath. She fired, recycled the bolt, fired again. Both targets fell in less than 5 seconds. A Soviet artillery observer present during the mission officially verified the strike. The transition to East Prussian soil in September 1944 transformed the tactical landscape. For the Soviet snipers, the War of Liberation ended. The War of Invasion began. German resistance reached a state of fanatical desperation. The terrain in East Prussia favored the defender. Dense forests, bombarded urban ruins, fortified zones engineered over decades. The Wehrmacht evolved. They deployed specialized hunter-killer teams to eliminate Soviet marksmen. They utilized preemptive artillery strikes on any suspected hideout. Sniper versus sniper engagements became the standard, not the exception. Rozа Šanina operated within this escalating lethality. Her performance followed a steep, documented trajectory. By late November 1944, the records of the 184th Regiment confirmed 42 kills. By December, the figure climbed to 51. Numerical impact. By January 1945, her total reached 59 confirmed eliminations. Every strike required independent verification by a squad observer. Every death appeared in the daily combat reports. These documents moved from the mud of the front lines to the desks of the General Staff. While the front headquarters recorded 59 liquidations, Shannina maintained a parallel accounting in her personal diary. This document now rests in the Arkhangelsk State University archives. It is not a memoir, it is a technical artifact of war. Shannina opens the notebook in a frozen trench. She grips a graphite pencil. The lead scratches against cheap gray field paper. She records the barometric pressure. She notes the wind speed. On one page, she sketches ballistic tables. Formulas for calculating distance based on target size fill the margins. She adjusts her scope settings for failing light. Technical precision was her shield against chaos. Did she trust the official tally? She did not. Shannina recorded only the deaths she witnessed directly. Every kill required verification by an officer. This was the bureaucracy of the individual soldier. To her, these figures were not medals, they were human lives. Her methodology remained rigid. Other snipers included estimations or battlefield assumptions in their reports. Shannina refused. She treated her ledger with the cold discipline of a laboratory log. She never counted a kill without a witness. The personal ledgers fell silent on January 27, 1945. In the marshlands near Ilmsdorf. The advance through the swamp ended in a German mortar strike. Shrapnel tore through the formation. The unit attempted to cross an exposed sector under heavy fire. Captain Vili Merkelov later recorded the sequence in a formal after-action report. The squad's artillery commander collapsed, wounded by jagged metal. Shannina moved. She had no military obligation to leave cover. She crawled across the frozen mud toward the officer while the air hummed with incoming steel. She covered the wounded commander with her own body. Other soldiers struggled to organize an evacuation under the barrage. Then the strike landed. Mortar fragments shredded her lower back and torso. Massive internal hemorrhaging followed. She survived for several hours, but the intensity of the engagement blocked any adequate medical intervention. The bureaucracy of death moved faster than the medics. Her comrades dug a shallow pit near the combat site. They marked the improvised grave with a bayonet driven into the earth. Her metal identification tag rattled against the steel blade in the wind. Captain Merkulov signed the death registration on January 28, 1945. Soviet statistics confirm a grim reality. Out of 800,000 women in the Red Army, sniper units suffered loss rates equal to male assault battalions. The system processed her file, closing the record of a combat unit that ceased to exist exactly 100 days before the war in Europe ended. In 2 years, this 18-year-old orphanage graduate will eliminate dozens of Wehrmacht soldiers in brutal hand-to-hand combat. In 1941, she was merely a statistical unit, one of thousands. The state system processed Aliya Nurmohambatovna Moldagulova as a resource. Born in 1925 in the Aktobe region, she lost her mother to death and her father to Stalinist purges. The mechanism of the Soviet state took custody. In Leningrad, officials opened her personal file at boarding school number 46. The air in the administrative wing smelled of low-grade ink and cheap government paper. A clerk dipped a steel nib into a well. He scratched her name into a ledger. Her life became a sequence of stamps and signatures. How did the system handle 1.5 million civilians? It converted demographics into logistics. Leningrad was dying. The German blockade tightened like a garrote around the imperial capital. Mass evacuation followed. The People's Commissariat for Education organized the transport of orphans to the Yaroslavl Oblast. Freight cars moved east. Children sat on wooden benches. Outside, the smell of burning wood mixed with the iron scent of the tracks. The state relocated her. It saved her life to prepare her for a different purpose. In 1942, Aliya appeared at a recruitment office in Yaroslavl. She was 16 years old, underage. The officers did not look for compassion. They looked for data. Her academic records were perfect. Her physical condition was elite. During preliminary tests, she hit every target. The system recognized a natural ballistics expert. It bypassed the age requirement. In mid-1943, the state formally enrolled her into the Specialized Sniper Academy. How could a 16-year-old girl outperform seasoned veterans? The answer remained fixed in ballistic metrics, a deviation of less than 1.5% at a distance of 600 meters. Enrolling in the academy in early 1943 triggered a brutal physiological and ballistic transformation. Training lasted 5 intensive months. Aliya spent her days at the Kuskovo firing range. She mastered windage, elevation, and breath control. According to academic standards, her performance surpassed the elite tier of the Red Army. Such precision earned her a rare institutional privilege. She received a personalized rifle. Armorers calibrated the telescopic optics specifically to her individual eye relief and physiological trigger pull. The weapon became an extension of her biology. In August 1943, the state assigned her to the 54th Independent Rifle Brigade of the 22nd Army. General Andrei Novikov took command of the sector. The Northwest Front was a labyrinth of swamps and fortified villages. War here moved in meters. In September, her unit reached the Velikiye Luki region. The bureaucracy began recording her efficiency immediately. During the first month of operations, the reconnaissance battalion verified 11 liquidations. Each kill required a formal report sent daily to the front headquarters. By October, the offensive shifted toward the Nevel-Pustoshka sector. The dense forests favored the specialized mobile sniper squads. Moldagulova moved through the marshes. She systematically eliminated enemy observation posts, clearing the path for the regular infantry units. She provided lethal fire cover to ensure the advance. 56 corpses confirmed. This count did not rely on estimates or battlefield rumors. It was a matter of bureaucratic precision. 11 confirmed kills served as the legal basis for a radical shift in status. By November 1943, the 54th Rifle Battalion issued a rare directive. They assigned the teenager a personal spotter. More importantly, they granted her exceptional authorization to operate as an autonomous combat unit. Tactical independence for a cadet was unheard of. The results dictated the protocol. The winter of 1943 and 1944 hit Lake Nevel with absolute brutality. Temperatures plummeted to 40 degrees below zero. In the frozen woods, ink froze in the wells. Lieutenant Ivan Golikov signed daily reports with a scratching pen, his fingers numb against the paper. The air was a wall of ice. Routine became a lethal grind. She hunted German artillery observers and engaged enemy snipers in precision duels. These engagements lasted for days. No movement, no warmth, only the rhythmic verification of targets. Golikov personally signed off on every casualty. His signature appears on every preserved document. There was no room for error in the archives. Every entry represented a verified ballistic termination. By December 1943, her documented count stood at 56. The status of an autonomous combat unit faced a critical ballistic test on January 11, 1944. The 54th Rifle Battalion launched an offensive near the village of Kazachika. The objective was a breakthrough of the German defensive line. A single fortified trench blocked the sector. From its depths, an MG-34 machine gun dominated the landscape. The German weapon fired up to 1,200 rounds per minute. This rate of fire created a wall of lead. Each burst lasted mere seconds, leaving microscopic pauses for movement. Captain Anatoly Surov identified the threat. He ordered Moldagulova to neutralize the position from a flank. The distance was 200 meters. The terrain was flat and entirely exposed. Every movement required a mathematical calculation of the machine gun's cycle. Moldagulova began to crawl. She moved centimeter by centimeter for over 3 hours. The cold was absolute. The snow offered no cover against the German optics. One mistake meant immediate termination. She reached the designated angle and stabilized her rifle. Moldagulova systematically eliminated 3 German soldiers stationed at the trench perimeters. Then, she shifted her aim to the primary machine gun operator. A single shot silenced the MG-34. The defensive geometry collapsed. A German grenade detonated. Shrapnel from a German grenade tore into her left shoulder and right thigh. Blood loss was immediate. Alia Moldagulova did not stop. She abandoned her bolt-action rifle. The distance had closed. She reached for a fallen enemy's weapon. Her fingers gripped the cold steel of a captured MP-40 submachine gun. The bolt clicked. The metallic rasp of the German action signaled a transition from precision to volume. She cleared the trench with bursts of 9mm fire. 18 years of biological life, 78 confirmed kills. The demographic statistics of the Soviet Union record a catastrophe. The generation born in the early 1920s faced near-total liquidation. Moldagulova represented the peak of this sacrificial curve. According to the official report by Lieutenant Golovnyov, she eliminated 3 more soldiers in hand-to-hand combat. She secured the position. Then, a single bullet struck her abdomen. Field surgeons at the mobile medical unit operated for hours. They worked under the smell of ether and scorched iron. The internal hemorrhaging was irreversible. On January 14, 1944, the biological process ceased. She had celebrated her 18th birthday only 4 days prior. The bureaucratic machinery functioned with cold efficiency. A clerk pulled her service record. The final entry noted 78 kills in less than 5 months of active duty. The state processed her death as a completed combat cycle. The military archive officially closed her personal file. The state processed the death of 78 targets as a completed combat cycle, but the bureaucratic machine required fresh input. The military archive closed one file to open another. Tatiana Nikolaevna Baramzina was born into this system on December 19, 1919, in the Udmurt Republic. The Soviet state did not just draft soldiers, it converted civilian expertise into ballistic advantages. Baramzina graduated from the Molotov Pedagogical Institute as a geography teacher. In the classroom, she mastered cartography and terrain analysis. By June 1943, the state repurposed these skills for liquidation. The scale of this conversion was industrial. Before the war, the Osoaviakim Society, later known as DOSOF, maintained over 13 million members. It functioned as a massive reservoir of semi-professional shooters. Baramzina entered this pipeline while simultaneously completing a 6-month field nursing course. How does a geography teacher become a lethal asset? She applied academic topography to the mechanics of a long-range shot. Calculation of wind deflection became a mathematical exercise. Map reading turned into the art of concealed positioning. Her university-level understanding of landscapes allowed her to predict enemy movement with clinical precision. In 1943, the transition from classroom to front line accelerated. Her performance during long-range practice sessions placed her at the top of her promotion. The military administration recognized the efficiency of her dual training. They authorized her transfer for advanced sniper instruction. Operation Bagration required more than raw numbers. It demanded precision assets. After 5 months of rigorous transformation, Baramzina was no longer a geography teacher. She was a weapon integrated into the 252nd Rifle Regiment. The Red Army Command moved her to the 3rd Belarusian Front. Major General Ivan Galanin took command of her sector. The objective was the destruction of the Wehrmacht Army Group Center. Baramzina brought a lethal metric to the field: 92%. This was her recorded accuracy rate against moving targets at distances between 400 and 600 meters. In her first 3 months on the front, unit commanders verified 16 kills in the daily reports. This was not enough. The strategic depth of the operation required specialized deployment behind enemy lines. Near the village of Pekalin, tactical planners identified a critical crossroads. Baramzina's battalion received the order to seize it. They moved under the cover of darkness. The only sound was the splash of water against light pontoons as they crossed the river. The instructions were rigid. Hold the position for 24 hours. Buy time for the main force to establish bridgeheads. The deployment began on July 4, 1944. The transition from the night deployment of July 4th quickly evolved into tactical isolation. A single wooden agricultural shed became the final refuge for 47 soldiers. What was the protocol for defending isolated medical points? Standard instructions mandated holding the perimeter for 24 hours using any available means. Baramzina reconfigured the space. Straw mats became surgical tables. Rations were repurposed as bandages. She synchronized 2 roles: the precision of a sniper and the urgency of a nurse. Outside, the geometry of defense took shape. Soldiers dug shallow trenches. Sandbags blocked the gaps in the timber walls. The German counterattack commenced in the early hours of July 5th. Mortars tore the roof. Hand grenades shattered the perimeter. Lieutenant Anatoly Borisov reported a critical breach on the right flank. Baramzina abandoned the bandages for a DP-27 light machine gun. The weapon's rhythmic clatter dominated the clearing. She neutralized 3 attackers before enemy fire smashed the receiver. The machine gun failed. She reached for her Mosin Nagant. Positioned behind a wall of sand, she monitored the tree line. The unit was depleted. Supply lines were severed. By the final hour of the siege, Baramzina counted her remaining resources. She had 14 rifle cartridges left. Colonel Vladimir Zamyatin later signed the official report of the 70th Division. He noted the final visual contact. Baramzina stood at the northeastern edge of the shed. She threw 2 grenades into an approaching German trench. The blast echoed for kilometers. Between 11:45 and 12:10, the perimeter collapsed. German forces overran the shed. There were no survivors. The Wehrmacht maintained an unwritten directive to execute all prisoners in sectors where they sustained heavy sniper casualties. The German directive regarding captured snipers shifted from interrogation to industrial elimination on July 6, 1944. Forensic Report number 447 of the 100th Rifle Division documented the results. Medical examiner Pavel Shantsov arrived at the recaptured position. He found the body outside the original shelter. The visual evidence contradicted standard combat protocols. Deep bayonet lacerations marked the face and neck. Massive contusions shattered the ribs and skull. A compound fracture of the right arm indicated a systematic process of trauma. Was this a result of stray shrapnel? No. Shantsov recorded a deliberate sequence of torture before the final act. The execution method utilized a 45mm BR-240 armor-piercing shell. This projectile was engineered to penetrate 40 millimeters of steel armor. At point-blank range, its application against a single human target was purely demonstrative. The kinetic energy obliterated the cranium. Blood-stained sniper insignias on the torn uniform remained the only clear markers of her status. Identification relied on the forensic reconstruction of physical fragments. The military bureaucracy processed the scene into document number 1638. Tatiana was listed as an irrecoverable loss of the 252nd Rifle Regiment. Investigators identified her remains only by the distinct remnants of her braided hair. The death of Tatiana Beremzina did not simply vanish into Archive Folder 1638. It triggered an immediate bureaucratic chain reaction. The Soviet state machine began transforming a battlefield atrocity into a formal legal instrument. On July 18, 1944, Colonel Zamyatin issued an urgent directive. He bypassed standard regimental channels. The target was the Defense Council of the Belarusian Front. Zamyatin demanded the Gold Star for Beremzina. He requested the title of Hero of the Soviet Union posthumously. The dossier was exhaustive. It contained daily combat logs. It held the raw testimonies of survivors. But the core was forensic. Investigators included high-contrast photographs of the remains. They attached a complete medical report detailing every incision, every bullet hole, every fracture. This documentation served a dual purpose. It wasn't just for a medal. These dossiers became the foundational evidence for future war crimes tribunals. Soviet investigators used the Beremzina file to map a specific pattern of violence. They codified atrocities committed against female combatants. This was no longer just a casualty report. Medical examiners used these findings to systematize the prosecution of systemic war crimes. The forensic evidence from Belarusian mass graves became the foundation for post-war indictments. Yet the systematic elimination of the enemy began years earlier. It started with a cold, calculated engineering of Soviet society. One file, 309 documented kills. This was the professional record of Lyudmila Mikhailovna Pavlichenko. No other female sniper achieved her level of international diplomatic recognition. She was not a miracle. She was a product. The process began on July 12, 1916, in Belaya Tsurkov. By 1930, the family moved to Kiev. Soviet industrialization was turning Ukrainian cities into massive production hubs. Human capital followed the same assembly line logic as steel. At 14, Pavlichenko entered a DOSAAF shooting club. This was a state-run paramilitary machine designed to militarize the civilian population. Imagine the Kiev range, the thick, heavy scent of gun oil, the rhythmic crack of small-bore rifles. Young women didn't just play sports, they mastered long-range ballistics. For 7 years, Lyudmila competed in regional tournaments. She collected expert marksman certifications like academic honors. She mastered precision techniques that professional soldiers struggled to grasp for a decade. The state was not just teaching a girl to shoot, it was calibrating a high-precision weapon. 1937. Elite snipers would eventually paralyze the defenses of Berlin in 1945. But in 1941, this path began at a recruitment office in Kiev. Lyudmila Pavlichenko was not a soldier. She was a history student at Kiev University. The university archives smelled of old paper and ink. Pavlichenko spent her days analyzing military strategy and geographic maps. She approached war as an academic discipline. How does a history student reach the front lines without basic infantry training? She traded the library for the shooting range. The scent of dust vanished, replaced by the sharp odor of gun grease. The test took place at 400 meters. The instructor watched. Pavlichenko adjusted the rifle. Her breathing slowed. 3 shots. She did not just hit the target. The bullets grouped in a circle less than 5 centimeters wide. This precision exceeded the qualification standards for active Wehrmacht snipers of the period. It was not instinct. It was a mathematical conversion of focus into lethality. The officers stopped suggesting she become a nurse. They signed her papers. The military bureaucracy bypassed the usual drills. Pavlichenko received her orders immediately. She joined the 25th Rifle Division. In August 1941, Pavlichenko reached the front line at Odessa with the 25th Rifle Division. The city was a labyrinth of skeletal remains. Brick dust from shattered buildings coated everything. It settled into the pores of the skin and clouded the rifle optics. This was no longer a shooting range. It was a geography of ruins and rubble. Did her academic background matter in this chaos? It provided the discipline for a lethal bureaucracy. Every kill required a witness. A spotter or a squad member had to verify the target. The Red Army treated death as a ledger entry. The siege lasted 70 days. In that window, Pavlichenko eliminated 187 enemies. Among them were 36 enemy snipers from the German and Romanian ranks. 187 kills. 70 days. The ratio was staggering. She operated with extreme patience. Pavlichenko remained motionless for hours in stone crevices, blending into the gray debris. She waited for the precise moment of exposure. Often, she fired 5 lethal shots from a single position before repositioning. By October, the defense collapsed under the weight of the Axis advance. The Soviet command ordered a full withdrawal. Pavlichenko boarded the transport ships as the army evacuated the city. In October 1941, the 25th Rifle Division evacuated to Sevastopol. The Crimean landscape rewrote the rules of engagement. Geography dictated physiology. Lyudmila Pavlichenko moved from the flat plains to a world of vertical stone and subterranean limestone. The defense of Sevastopol lasted from November 1941 to June 1942. It was a siege measured in meters. Pavlichenko occupied natural caves and rocky crevices. These became her permanent habitat. The air inside remained heavy with dampness. Every shot produced a sharp, metallic echo against the stone walls. Outside, the landscape was a jagged ruin. How did she survive the constant carpet bombing? She retreated deep into the limestone tunnels. These underground arteries provided the only shield against heavy German artillery. Between barrages, she crawled back to the surface. She merged with the gray rock for days at a time. Movement was a death sentence. The shifting terrain forced a change in hardware. On the rocky slopes, distances varied wildly. Pavlichenko reached for the SVT-40 semi-automatic rifle. It was a compromise of engineering. The semi-automatic mechanism sacrificed the surgical precision of a bolt-action rifle. In exchange, it offered volume. A squad of German infantry would crest a ridge. Pavlichenko no longer had to cycle a manual bolt. She pulled the trigger. The SVT-40 cycled a new round instantly. In the narrow trenches and shattered ruins of Crimea, speed became more lethal than a perfect grouping. 1 shot for accuracy, 10 shots for survival. The siege of the Black Sea fortress continued for 8 months. The SVT-40 semi-automatic rifle redefined the mechanics of the duel within the 3rd Battalion of the 25th Regiment. High-precision bolt-action rifles remained for distance. The Tokarev provided the rate of fire needed for the chaos of the trenches. How were 309 kills verified without modern recording equipment? Staff protocols of the Southern Front demanded independent visual confirmation for every hit. No confirmation meant no record. Between December 1941 and February 1942, the official logs credited her with 72 additional targets. 6 were German snipers. These were not mere shots, they were psychological marathons. A sniper duel is an analytical vacuum. No movement for 48 hours. 1 breath every 10 seconds. Both hunters studied shadows, calculated cigarette smoke patterns, and memorized the rhythm of enemy blink rates. Silence was the primary weapon. In March 1942, the Red Army promoted her to the rank of lieutenant. She no longer just hunted, she commanded a specialized platoon. By late May, the Southern Front headquarters formalized her tally. 309 confirmed kills. Her active career ended on June 2, 1942. The mortar shell struck on June 2, 1942. Shrapnel tore through flesh as Pavlichenko moved to a new firing position. The mud of Sevastopol's trenches was her last memory of the front. Behind the lines, surgeons worked in field hospitals. She recovered, but the high command issued a silent order. A sniper with 309 kills was too valuable to lose in a ditch. Shrapnel converted the lieutenant from a combatant into a strategic weapon. A surreal transformation began. In August 1942, the Soviet sniper landed in Washington. Franklin Roosevelt and Eleanor Roosevelt waited at the White House. This was an unprecedented act of diplomacy. Never before had a Soviet soldier received official honors from an American president. The contrast was absolute. In Sevastopol, she breathed the sulfur of explosions and the rot of the siege. In the Oval Office, she stepped onto thick carpets under crystal chandeliers. Camera flashes replaced muzzle flashes. The White House photographic archives recorded every second. How did the American public react to a woman who had eliminated a small battalion? The press looked for a celebrity. They found a soldier. Pavlichenko faced journalists, unions, and women's organizations. She did not wear evening gowns. She wore a thick wool tunic, sniper insignias, and heavy military medals. Through radio interviews and public meetings, the sniper demanded a second front. Pavlichenko spoke to the masses and answered questions from the microphones. From Washington, the demand for a second front moved to Ottawa and the industrial heart of Great Britain. Pavlichenko arrived in Canada wearing full military regalia. Her chest carried the weight of Soviet sniper insignia and high-tier decorations. To the North American public, she was a physical paradox. The rhetoric remained icy and analytical. Pavlichenko avoided emotional pleas or political theory. She operated with the precision of a ballistics report. She provided raw data on German casualties. She detailed the exact conditions of the Eastern Front. Her goal was singular: Allied military intervention. In Ottawa, she met with high-ranking military officials. Veteran organizations issued symbolic awards. Then, the mission crossed the Atlantic. In the United Kingdom, Pavlichenko walked through the aisles of massive armament factories. She met British Army representatives to exchange technical data. They discussed sniper tactics and specialized optics. The exchange of expertise became physical. Pavlichenko felt the cold steel and balanced weight of a gift from her allies, a Winchester rifle. It featured a precision American telescopic sight. This was not a souvenir, it was a professional recognition of her lethality. The weapon survived the war and the decades that followed. Today, the American Winchester remains on permanent display in Moscow. It is housed within the Central Museum of the Armed Forces. In November 1942, the American journey ended. Lyudmila Pavlichenko returned to a different reality. She no longer held a rifle on the front lines. The Soviet High Command recognized her value as an institutional asset. The Presidium of the Supreme Soviet awarded her the title of Hero of the Soviet Union. She received the Order of Lenin and the Gold Star. Her military file was formally closed. It recorded 309 confirmed kills. Every target was verified. No propaganda adjustments. No inflated statistics. This accuracy turned her record into a blueprint for precision. 309 documented eliminations. Pavlichenko transitioned from the trenches to the classroom. She became an instructor at the Central Sniper School. Her methods discarded theory for the mechanics of urban survival. She taught long-range ballistics through the lens of Sevastopol and Odessa. Her technical reports became the foundation of the Red Army's standard sniper manuals. These documents remained unchanged and authoritative until 1953. While Pavlichenko's battlefield reports were being codified into tactical manuals, the state apparatus was already processing the fate of 16-year-old Nina Lobkovskaya. Her biography carried a lethal defect. In 1937, the NKVD arrested her father during the height of the Great Purge. The family was instantly reclassified. Neighbors in Western Siberia turned away. Silence met them in the streets. They carried the permanent stigma of relatives of an enemy of the people. What forced the daughter of a man repressed in 1937 to volunteer for the front? For the children of the purged, the front was often the only path to rehabilitation. It was a biological and social gamble. Blood spilt for the state could wash away the enemy label from a family name. The harsh environment of Western Siberia provided the physical foundation. Bitter winds hardened her endurance. Rations were scarce. Survival was not a concept, but a daily mechanical grind. In 1941, the German invasion turned the Soviet Union into a continental slaughterhouse. Nina was 16. She watched the mobilization from the periphery, waiting for the legal window to open. The Soviet military machine required massive infusions of personnel to replace the catastrophic losses of the first months. Individual trauma was irrelevant to the bureaucracy. By 1942, she reached the official recruitment age of 17. Elite infantry requires extreme selection. 1942 marked the turning point for Nina Lobkovskaya. After months of waiting, she reached the legal recruitment age of 17. The bureaucracy opened the doors to the Podolsk Women's Sniper Academy near Moscow. The winter of 1942 and 1943 was a physiological filter. Temperatures dropped below -30. Metal rifle components froze solid, searing the skin of the cadets' hands like hot coals. In Podolsk, resistance was the only currency. The academy did not just teach ballistics, it engineered psychological stability under duress. Many failed. Physical endurance and mental grit dictated survival in the snow. Archival data from the Central Military Archive reveals the results of this filtration. Lobkovskaya's performance was not merely adequate, she mastered the standard Mosin Nagant with surgical precision. Beyond marksmanship, her tactical instinct emerged during simulated combat. She analyzed terrain as a grid of fire sectors. While others focused on targets, she focused on coordination and command. The final evaluation confirmed her status. Out of hundreds of recruits, she finished in the top 5%. The academic evaluation at Podolsk translated into immediate authority. Lyudmila Pavlichenko's precedent had been set, but the demographic reality of the Third Shock Army dictated a new, harsher necessity. At 18 years old, Nina Lobkovskaya transitioned from a top-tier graduate to a commander of 108 elite female snipers. The command structure of the Belarusian front faced a catastrophic deficit of experienced officers. High casualty rates among mid-level commanders forced the military bureaucracy to entrust strategic units to teenagers. Lobkovskaya stood before her formation. 108 women. Some were her peers, others were significantly older. She performed a visual inspection of the line, checking the bolt actions and the fit of the winter camouflage. The responsibility was absolute. The Third Shock Army specialized in the mechanics of urban assault. Their doctrine prioritized the systematic blinding of enemy defenses. Snipers did not just hunt soldiers, they targeted the eyes of the Wehrmacht. Artillery spotters, machine gun crews, forward observers. Neutralizing these targets was the prerequisite for any infantry advance. The tactical environment was a labyrinth of vertical threats. Lobkovskaya's unit moved into the ruins of the Belarusian sector. The air was thick with the smell of pulverized masonry and old soot from collapsed ceilings. They didn't seek comfort, they sought height. The snipers identified partially destroyed apartment blocks and jagged industrial skeletons as their primary nodes of operation. Small teams detached from the main body to infiltrate the gray zone. They crawled through basement breaches and climbed rusted rebar to reach high-vantage nests. Every movement was calculated to avoid silhouette detection against the winter sky. The objective was to cover the regular infantry by establishing a perimeter of invisible lethality. Lobkovskaya signaled the deployment. The marksmen occupied their forward positions deep within the ruins. The tactical doctrine of the Third Shock Army faced a definitive trial during the Vistula-Oder offensive in January 1945. The terrain was a skeletal landscape of suburbs. Lobkovskaya's marksmen moved into the outskirts of Kustrin. Their objective was specific. They had to blind the defense. A sniper platoon functions as a single organism. Coordination of 108 women across an urban ruins required absolute silence. Radio use was impossible. Signals revealed positions. Instead, Nina established a primitive but flawless system of hand gestures. The architecture of the battle remained mute. One gesture shifted the fire. Another ordered a rotation. They occupied river crossings and neutralized observation posts dominating the Soviet advance routes. The marksmen practiced infiltration into enemy-controlled sectors under the cover of diversionary fire. The mechanical synchronization produced a lethal psychological effect. A simultaneous volley from dozens of rifles created the illusion of a massive infantry assault. German units scrambled. They sought cover from an invisible front. They found none. The records of the Third Shock Army confirmed the efficiency of this silent coordination. Between January and February, the unit eliminated 47 enemy targets in the Kustrin sector. Signal flares and hand motions replaced the spoken word. The system functioned without a single voice. The tactics refined near Kustrin found their ultimate application in April 1945 on the streets of Berlin. The capital of the Reich had become a skeletal labyrinth of stone and rebar. In the Kreuzberg and Tiergarten districts, the density of the urban fabric turned every window into a potential muzzle flash. Soviet artillery sat idle in these sectors. High command could not risk shelling entrenched positions without vaporizing their own advancing infantry. The burden of the purge fell entirely on the snipers. In the ruins of Kreuzberg, the air tasted of pulverized brick and the acidic stench of smoldering upholstery. Nina's platoon moved into the second offensive ring. Their mission was surgical: eliminate the stay-behind German marksmen haunting the rear of the Soviet advance. This was not a battle of movement, it was a study of stillness. A curtain fluttered in a window where there was no wind. A cigarette coal glowed for a fraction of a second in the depths of a blackened basement. A jagged piece of rubble shifted 2 inches to the left. These were not mere details, they were death warrants. Nina watched a single piece of glass among the debris. It caught a stray ray of light, a telescopic lens. One shot followed. The lens shattered, followed by the man behind it. During 3 days of continuous operations, her unit liquidated 14 enemy snipers. The urban map was a grid of lethal variables that Nina read like a scholar. To coordinate the hunt, she seized a strategic vantage point in the heart of the government quarter. She established her primary command post inside the Ministry of Food and Agriculture. From the ruined streets of Kreuzberg, Lobkovskaya's snipers pushed toward the Reichstag. By April 28, 1945, the platoon reached the symbolic epicenter of the Reich. Historical records from the Third Shock Army confirm their presence. The mission was surgical. While assault units prepared the final charge, Lobkovskaya's women operated in the shadows of the surrounding structures. The objective: suppression of German nests. The Reichstag was a fortress, protected by veteran marksmen hidden in the flanking government buildings. Every window was a potential kill zone. The Soviet infantry could not advance while these nests remained active. Lobkovskaya's platoon systematically neutralized multiple positions. They provided the lethal curtain of fire necessary for the assault groups to reach the parliamentary walls. Behind every iconic image of the victory banner, there was a mathematical clearing of the perimeter. The infantry claimed the roof, but the snipers secured the approach. In 1946, a memorandum from the Ministry of Defense finalized the data. The official record for Nina Lobkovskaya stands at 89 confirmed kills. To reach the verified count of 89 confirmed kills, Lobkovskaya adapted a dual weapon system similar to the one Lyudmila Pavlichenko utilized in Crimea. Precision demanded flexibility. The sniper carried a standard bolt-action Mosin Nagant with a telescopic sight for extreme range. For the chaotic density of urban combat, she added the semi-automatic Tokarev SVT-40. The bolt action handled the distance. The Tokarev provided the rate of fire. The mechanics of the SVT-40 carried a specific risk. Every pull of the trigger resulted in a sharp, metallic clang of the bolt cycling. In a silent city, this sound was a beacon for counter-snipers. Survival required rigid discipline. Lobkovskaya established a lethal protocol: the rule of 2 shots. This was a culture of movement written in the blood of predecessors. The first shot alerted the enemy. The second confirmed the kill. Staying for a third was a death sentence. Lobkovskaya observed a pattern among the fallen. Inexperienced shooters often remained in one position, seduced by a clear line of sight. They prioritized the target over the exit. They died in their nests. Lobkovskaya never stayed. She fired the second round and abandoned the position immediately. The surrender of Berlin on May 9, 1945, marked the end of the combat phase. For Nina Lobkovskaya, the war of movement transitioned into a war of records. The Red Army Command codified her performance into bureaucratic steel. She received the Order of the Red Star. Later, the Order of the Patriotic War, First Class. These awards did not just count her 89 individual kills. They recognized her ability to command a sniper unit in high-intensity urban environments. Was she a face for the masses? No. Unlike Pavlichenko, the Soviet state never sent Lobkovskaya on diplomatic tours to Washington or London. She lacked international fame. Her value remained internal. The military machine viewed her not as a symbol, but as a specialized asset. Her expertise was withdrawn from the front lines and injected directly into the training manuals of the Central Women's Sniper Training School. She spent the next 15 years shaping the next generation of marksmen. Her career within the Red Army outlasted the Stalin era. This professional longevity transformed her from a combatant into an institutional pillar of Soviet marksmanship. Lobkovskaya remained in active service until her retirement in the 1960s.